Greetings, beloveds, and welcome to Unity of Tempe, and peace be with you. I'm Reverend Mitzi. So this morning we're beginning a new short series entitled When God Calls, What Do You Do? So let me ask you a question, or a couple of questions. Do you at times, even with your Unity background, struggle with anger or resentment or fear? Anyone? Be anyone brave to put up their hand and say, yes, I do? Probably. Or do you perhaps resist the call of spirit when guided to do something helpful? That involves someone to whom you might have anger or resentment or fear. And anger is, spirit is calling you to do something and you're like, yeah, I don't really want to. Anyone ever? You don't have to raise your hand, but I know you do. I know you do, because we're spiritual beings having a very human existence with human feelings, right? So in this series, we'll unpack a relevant piece of literature about someone who faced all of these things and a lot more. And it's a story that you might remember. And perhaps as a child, you were intrigued with it. But later, you dismissed it as fantasy, not considering how it might have relevance to your spiritual life and divine connection today. Well, that was how it was for me until I revisited, unveiling here what we're going to be talking about, the book of Jonah a few years ago. I found it full of metaphysical and metaphorical meaning, which is relevant to our lives and very relevant to the times in which we are currently living. So to set the scene, I'll read chapter 1 today, and after I'll share some context and background, why Jonah is relevant today, some unity interpretation, and meaning that it has for us. And in the following weeks of this series, we'll explore other chapters and deeper meanings and what it means for us, because that's really the important thing right today. How does it have insight for our own lives? But before I read chapter 1, I want to share some wise words from Elizabeth Sand Turner. She was a Unity minister and was also an author. And Elizabeth said that whenever we open the Bible, which we don't do a lot of Bible stories here, but when we do, we get into the deeper metaphysical meaning of them. She shared this, that to say, let there be light. And when we've completed the reading, and there was light. And then she goes on to say, as we accept the light, the obscurities of the Bible text are clarified, and a revelation of the supreme truths with which it is replete come to our eager consciousness. So, let us affirm together. Let there be light. And again, let there be light. And now, as Sandra would say, you know what I'm going to say, with gusto, let there be light. And so it is. Okay, so I'm going to read the first chapter of Jonah. It's going to be up here, so you can follow along. If you hear things and you're like, what am I hearing right now? Well, why? Just stick with it, because we're going to unwrap it after the reading. Sit back and enjoy it as an interesting story. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, Let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity, because there's got to be someone to blame, right? They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not because the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Da, 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 da. Thus endeth the first chapter of Jonah. It's one of the shortest and most familiar books in the Bible. Who read this as a child? Who's familiar with the story of Jonah? Who isn't familiar with this? It's okay if you're not familiar with this story. Okay, so who was this Jonah? We're going to get into that in a minute. But scholars think that Jonah was written between 800 to 200 BC, but they're not sure who wrote it. And what exactly is it? Is it a short story? Is it satire? Is it allegory? Is it myth? Is it a parable? Well, scholars have differing views on this. And of course, we recognize its obvious humor. I could hear some of you laughing at it. You're kind of like, "Oh, that's funny." You know, like, should I laugh? I don't know if I should laugh. It's biblical reading. Should I laugh? Yes, it's funny at times. So it's okay to laugh. And we recognize that it has ideas in it that are similar to myth. And it is used as a teaching tool to illustrate spiritual points. So in a way, it's not unlike the parables, right, which are also used as spiritual teaching tools. Now, of course, today, there are people who have an inerrant view of the Bible. They believe that everything in this Bible is absolute truth. But we don't have this view in Unity. We look at Scripture often as a metaphysical, metaphorical, as a way, as stories that were told by people to really enlighten us into deeper ways. They were stories told about people, about how they were looking at the world. And so we are grateful that some of these stories have the ability to speak to us in very big ways beyond what is just merely presented here. So back to what we do know about this story. It's set in the period of the Assyrian Empire, prior to the destruction of Nineveh in 612 BC. And it was written as a protest against racial and religious exclusiveness. Well, isn't that fascinating? Written as a protest against racial and religious exclusiveness. What do you think as humanity? Thousands of years later, we would have evolved beyond that. But no, we haven't. I mean, you just look out of the world and you see what's going on, right? It's still the cause of division, chaos, hatred, violence, terrorism, and wars today. But ultimately, the story of Jonah brings out the truth that we are all beloved children of God, something we affirm every week, right? I am a beloved child of God. Say it with me. I am a beloved child of God, here to be an ambassador of good. We say that every week. We haven't said it yet, so don't be like, I missed it. We haven't said it yet. We said it just now. So is everyone else. But sometimes that's all covered up. That God essence is covered up with a lot of muck on people. So who was this Jonah? Well, in 2 Kings, there is a mention of a prophet named Jonah from Gath-Helper in Galilee, who was the son of Amittai, and that's probably the same Jonah. And we know little about him, but we do know that his finances afforded him to be able to buy a ticket on a boat, right? And that his life of means was disrupted with directives that will put him in an entirely different direction. So God calls Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh in Assyria to deliver a message to the Ninevites that unless they change their ways, God will destroy the city. And what does Jonah do when he gets this call? He exits stage left, right? And he runs exactly the opposite way. He boards a ship for Tarshish towards Spain. And interestingly, where does he board this ship? Do you remember? Yes, who said that? Yes, thank you, Glenda. He boards it in Joppa, which today is known as Jaffa, and it's located in Tel Aviv. So, right down here, interesting. And he tries to go, well, he does. He goes off, I'll just go to Tarshish to Spain instead of up here. So this was the main port of the coast before the Israelis constructed the ports of Haifa and, thank you. I've been practicing this word. I still can't say it. So would you say it? Haifa and Ashdod. And it actually gives me chills, because if you remember a few weeks ago, I said in a message, I think I need to revisit the story of Jonah. Does anyone remember that? I know I said it sometime. And it was way before what was going on now. I was like, we need to revisit that story. And so it's really gives me chills about how relevant this is and how relevant this story becomes. But why does Jonah board a ship, not for Nineveh, but for the opposite direction of Tarshish? Why does he run away from Spirit's call? He does so because he detests the Ninevites. He'd love nothing better than to deliver some really, really bad news to them. But he believes that if he does so, that God will be merciful to them, and he certainly doesn't want that. The last thing he wants is to help any Ninevites receive any divine favors, so he toodles off to Tarshish. And aboard the ship, Jonah's despondency and anguish is so great that he'd rather be thrown overboard than deliver this message. But why does he have such resistance? Aren't you all wondering, why? Glenda knows. But why does he have this resistance? Well, it turns out they actually had pretty good reason to be so resistant. Nineveh was a principal province in Assyria, and Assyrians were known for inflicting physical and psychological warfare, terror, and torture on the enemies, including Israel. After Assyrians conquered a kingdom, they left a message that said, "Don't mess with us," by impaling bodies of their victims on stakes, and not even children were spared the violence. Well, does that sound familiar? What's happening in our world right now? So in 722 BC, they conquered the northern kingdoms of Israel and may have laid siege to Jonah's hometown and even his people. And Jonah's loved ones may even have been killed by the Assyrians, by the Ninevites. So it's understandable, now that we hear this in context, why Jonah goes, "Pachoo." Just hearing the name Nineveh could have struck him with bitterness, dread, and fear, perhaps even PTSD of horrors that were inflicted upon his own family. So from Jonah's point of view, the Ninevites were godless and had no right to be saved from any destruction whatsoever. And it's interesting that Nineveh's ruins are located in northern Iraq next to Mosul, an area that's also seen great violence in modern history. And that's next to Tikrit, the birthplace of Saddam Hussein. And ISIS destroyed much of the ancient city of Nineveh and its artifacts, declaring them blasphemous and idolatrous. So as Nineveh is located at a place with which the US had been at war, and as all of this is unfolding right now in the world, this story actually challenges us in this modern time to consider how we view people we think are our enemies, how we interact with them, people we have resentments and hatred and fear and anguish against. Jonah was called to deliver a message to enemies that had been at war with his people, and the thought of God sparing the Ninevites disturbs his sense of justice. If they live and prosper, he doesn't even want to be on the planet anymore. So the book of Jonah is full of practical spiritual insight. He's receptive to divine direction, but stubborn as to who is worthy. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Not worthy. Absolutely not worthy. Fascinating in light of what's happening. The prophetic, so according to Charles Fillmore, who is co-founder of Unity with Myrtle Fillmore, he says that Jonah represents the prophetic state of mind which, if used without divine love, fixes people in bondage to belief in a law of cause and effect where there is no room for forgiveness. The mind, on its highest plane, declares peace and goodness. That's what we're about, peace and goodness. But at times, every single one of us can have distorted views of what is good, because what happens? We get caught up in envy and anger and resentment and fear and petty stuff, right? And then big stuff too. All of us, we all said, yeah, we do. We do. So that's basically an analysis of chapter 1. It's a lot to take in, right? And the big fish and the whale, well, the most famous part of the story, we barely got to that. It was like at the last line. That's going to be for chapter 2. And next week, we're going to dive into the whale along with Jonah and explore the metaphysical meaning of the darkness that surrounds him. But in the meantime, what about you? Perhaps like Jonah, you're running away from something. Perhaps you're struggling with anger or bitterness or resentment or fear or envy. Perhaps it pains you to see someone who hurt you or who has hurt you doing well in life. And it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that we can hurt another by being angry or by not forgiving them. But actually, we're hurting ourselves. Holding on to and nursing anger adversely affects our health. We know that. We hold on to that anger and that rage and that resentment. It physically hurts us. And it affects our ability to think clearly. And anger is an addictive state. Did you know that? The more we focus on the anger, the more we nurse it. And so it gets a hold of us, and its impulsive outbursts can lead us to say or do things that we later regret. If you've never in your life, in anger, said anything that you later regret, raise your hand now. We will all bow down to you. Neil, we believe you. But Glenda's saying, no, you have. So we called you, your wife is calling you out. We love you. So what can we do when we are angry? What if we don't believe we can forgive? Anyone ever been there? That's so ruthless. I cannot ever possibly forgive that. Well, the first thing to do is to breathe. And another one. And one more. As you do so, affirm that even though your heart and mind may not yet be willing to forgive, you are willing to be willing to release the addictive state of anger, and then prepare for forgiveness by acknowledging, this is really important, acknowledging all the feelings that you have. Acknowledge them all, get them out. Not to your best friend. I mean, that's okay. But it's better to acknowledge them in prayer, in meditation to Spirit. And you can swear you can do whatever you need to do, because the Spirit within will not care. You can lay it all out, you can write it down, and it's best if we do it one-on-one. And then ask for the Christ presence within you, this higher power, for help in being willing to be willing. So let us affirm together. I am willing to be willing to release any anger, resentment, or unforgiveness I am holding. And that's conscious and also the unconscious stuff that we know is back of it. So let's say it again. I am willing to be willing to release any anger, resentment, or unforgiveness I am holding. One more time. Wait. I want you to not just say the words, but really, really think about what you're saying. Because you're going to have a change that's going to happen. You're going to have something that's going to happen this week. That's going to, an old wound, an old hurt, something you've been holding on to is going to be kind of loosened, like a cough, and you're like, I wish I could just get that phlegm up. Sorry, that's kind of a gross idea, but sometimes you're coughing, it's like, I just can't get. But that's what's going to happen. If you really mean this, something's going to happen this week. I feel it. So say it like, just for yourself, and like you're really, really, really meaning this. I am willing to be willing to release any anger, resentment, or unforgiveness I am holding. And then we acknowledge that we can't control others. Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we could just control the whole world? Push a button. Peace on earth now. Yes, please. Yes. Little prosperity for everyone. Everyone having equal amounts. Wouldn't that be lovely? Well, we can't do that. But we do have control over one person. That is us. And sometimes that's even hard, right? Our own thoughts and our old things, bringing them and like swimming into action. But that is the person we can work with. So as you turn within, think of Spirit's peace and love until you're calmed. Peace, be still. Then you'll be guided to do and say things which will not aggravate the situation. We don't want to aggravate it. Treat yourself with loving compassion and remember that God can provide what others have failed to give and that forgiveness brings peace. So next week we're going to explore more of this and through the metaphysical lens, and specifically those times when we get into a deep pit of despair. Where we're like, anyone ever be? I have certainly been there in my life. So it's going to be about that as we look at Jonah in the whale, what that means. So to anchor this today, there's a song that we probably did recently, but it's a really great Karen Drucker song. You can use it as prayer. You can sing along with it. Just listen to the words and think of it in context of this message.
Will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. For every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am stronger every moment, every day. My mind is willing and my heart is open wide. I trust my instincts and let Spirit be my guide. I vow to live a life that's real and pure and free. As I continue walking in this mystery, I will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. For every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am grateful every moment, every day. There may be walls, there may be roadblocks in my way, but I can choose to take a higher path each day. And now I know that what I thought was safe and sound was only habit and regret that held me down. I will surrender to my greatest, highest good. I will release any fear that blocks my way. For every step I take is taken in pure faith, and I am kinder every moment, every day, and I'm more loving every moment, every day. I will surrender every moment, every day.
As I was listening to that song, I was just overcome with gratitude for every one of you. I am really overcome all of a sudden, because as so many things are going on, you're choosing to be here and work on yourself and be love and be light and be peace and kindness in the world. And I don't know if you know how huge that is. That's huge, because we can look out and we can go, what can we do? We can be here and we can grow. The last lines, and I'm more loving, I'm more kind every day. I'm willing. And I just want to give every one of you a huge hug and say thank you. Thank you for the light that you bring and share with the world, every single one of you. Thank you. And to my beloved husband, Ron. So let's say together, I am a beloved child of God, here to be an ambassador of good. Oh, yes, you are. And thank you. Thank you for being an ambassador of good in the world. So now it is time to share of our blessings. We know that we live in an abundant universe, and so we are grateful to share our blessings with one another. And let us say together, I am a joyful sharer of my good. I remember that as I give, I receive, and that God is my source. Yes, indeed. And this really helps us to stay here as Unity of Tempe. So we're so very grateful for your gifts and your generosity. If you prefer to give on Zelle, there's the Zelle, and also PayPal. We do accept PayPal. So thank you so very, very much. Thank you. And to all those who give online as well, thank you. And for those at home who give online, we appreciate. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We bless these gifts. We bless the stewardship of their use. We bless each and every person, knowing that as they give, they prosper in exceedingly. What they give comes back to them a bazillion-fold. We bless every prayer in the prayer box, that ever has been in the prayer box or ever will be in the prayer box. Thank you, God. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, Kent and Glenda and Carla. Yes, we do support and partner with Matthew's Crossing to support our local community. So you can bring in food or supplies anytime. This is a list of what they often need, but anything can be supportive. And, you know, if you're at the dollar store or somewhere you have an excess at home, bring something in. It's a way that we can be a blessing in the community. So you're important, you matter, and you make a difference. Say that to someone. You are important, you matter, and you make a difference. So we invite you to be with us next week as we continue our journey with Jonah and discover practical spiritual insight for life, and especially those times when we feel in the pit of despair. Because you might be not there right now, but it'll probably come back. So it's like good to get some tools for the toolbox for when we do feel in that pit. So who will you invite next week? So let us say together our prayer of protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. All is well, and we are grateful. Yes, indeed, we are grateful. So, beloveds online, please come be with us in person very soon. We love you and we miss you. Have a wonderful week.